Growing up as a kid in the 2000s, I was exposed to a lot of cartoons that you probably remember. Rugrats, Fairly OddParents, Ed, Edd and Eddy, but the king of them all to me was always SpongeBob SquarePants. Undoubtedly Nickelodeon's most popular show ever, and one of the most recognizable and beloved cartoon IPs. I don't need to tell you that this character and show shaped a lot of my humor growing up. But of course, now that I'm grown up, I have to ask, what happened to this guy? Well, he had a couple movies, one of which is the cornerstone of any developing child's childhood, and his show has gone on so long that it has 2 spin-offs, and from what I hear, neither are good. And then there's the video games. There's a lot of these babies out there, most well known among them probably being Battle for Bikini Bottom. The one I played was Lights Camera Pants, which is a Mario Party clone that's actually still really fun to play today. Like, they didn't have to go this hard for a SpongeBob game. Regardless, none of these really fit my channel's aesthetic, so why am I talking about them? Well, since fans finally had their hands on some 3D renders of the sponge, they could basically do whatever they wanted with him going forward. And what did they do? Well, they f***ed him up. SpongeBob horror games are not the most rare thing you can find, most of them being based on the idea that corrupting SpongeBob is funny. And damn it, they're right. Probably the most popular of what I'd call these spoof Bob games was Mr. Krabs overdoses on ketamine and dies. A game where Mr. Krabs overdoses on ketamine and dies. This little 20-minute adventure actually went on to be a really popular game for speedrunning because of its wonky physics. At one point, even Moist Critical held a world record for the game. Would I necessarily call this a horror game? No, not really, unless you count all the f***ed up models here, but I figured I'd be doing a disservice to everyone if I didn't at the very least mention it. Probably the first thing that comes to your mind when you think SpongeBob horror is creepypastas. Which is totally fair. There have been a number of SpongeBob creepypastas in the past, with arguably the most famous among them being The Red Mist, which is an expanded version of an original story called Squidward's Suicide. It's essentially the same thing, but longer, and goes further into the cause of the titular suicide. In the story, Squidward is visited by a salesman who tells him the red mist is coming. He bombs on stage and goes home. Interspliced with the footage apparently is a grisly murder of some kind. I can't really go into detail, but it's some messed up stuff. Eventually, the supposed lost episode ends with, well, you know. So when I see a game has been made inspired by this story, you know I have to check it out. Well, unfortunately, this game is only loosely connected to that original story. There's no mention of the salesman or anything like that. You play as a police officer investigating Squidward's house after his supposed death. SpongeBob and Patrick have gone missing, with their less known whereabouts being his house. Upon entering, you walk through what I believe is his basement. It's lined with shelves of gray boxes and nondescript black cans. As you wander, you can find several of Squidward's personal belongings. As I understand, collecting them versus not collecting them will have an impact on your ending, of which there are 4. You're able to sprint, but your sprint meter is limited and does not regenerate, so use it wisely. However, as far as I've seen, you only really need it for one part of the game, so don't be afraid to use it if you feel like this is taking forever. As you explore, you will find various body parts belonging to SpongeBob and Patrick, as well as the code SB129. I don't know what this means, but there's apparently a secret ending associated with it. As for the ending I got, well, I collected all 7 items, avoided dying by the big Squidward face, and made it to the end of the game, so I got the corrupted ending. I don't know what this ending really means, but it's cool I guess. But as you can probably tell from this footage, this game isn't really anything spectacular, and while it is enjoyable, it's more so enjoyable in an ironic sense. A big problem with trying to turn SpongeBob into a horror character is you have to try really hard to invest players into your story and atmosphere, which, let's just say, SpongeBob does not exactly lend well to. But maybe we haven't found the right game yet. So how about a game from 2018, 3 AM at the Krusty Krab. In this game, you play as Mr. Krabs, who stayed late counting his money. However, the slinging slasher has come to kill. Now, first things first, I do want to say that I appreciate that this game is using an actually established character as its main villain. That's cute, and it shows that this game probably wasn't meant to be taken seriously in the first place. Second, am I like the only person who ever thought that that episode was actually kind of spooky? I mean, I grew up with a fear of the dark, so I was right there with SpongeBob not wanting to go outside at night. Anyway, this game is equally as short as Red Mist, but much more of a game. You have a number of objectives to complete, and the ever-dangerous slinging slasher will sometimes spawn in to chase you away. You have to pack up your money, empty out the register, look for pennies in the trash, and pack away uneaten Krabby Patties. After all of this has been handled, you can enter the basement where you must find the key. After retrieving the key, you exit the restaurant, lock the doors, get in your boat, and that's the end of the game. There is also an endless mode, which I didn't check out, but it's there. This game is ridiculous, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't at the very least enjoyable. Having to hide from the slinging slasher is actually a decent challenge, especially with how long it takes to perform certain objectives. If there were any improvements I'd make to this game, It would be adding more objectives to complete and maybe more levels. Sure, it's 3 AM at the Krusty Krab, but what if after you beat the Krusty Krab portion, you go to Mr. Krabs' house, or Sandy's tree dome? Imagine if you had to complete tasks across various locations with increasing difficulty. As it stands, the game is super easy once you understand how the slasher works. He can't see all that well except for whatever's dead ahead of him, so if you hide behind a wall, he'll probably disappear. All in all, this game is definitely the best we've seen so far, but it's far from being a horror game. But we're not done yet. The Krusty Seller is the game I knew the least about when I started making this video. Despite this, I went in kind of expecting something quality-wise on the level of the previous games. And boy, did that not disappoint. In this game, you play as SpongeBob, exploring the Krusty Seller, looking for the one thing crazy fish guys, worms in wheelchairs, and demented old ladies have in common: chocolate. When the game starts, you drop down to the floor below you and talk to Mr. Krabs, who explains he put the secret formula in a chocolate bar. Whatever. You open the door to the cellar and go in, where you're presented with a map telling you where the chocolate bar is. As far as I can tell, the chocolate bar can only spawn in 2 spots. If it were more random, then I'd totally be on board. As you explore, avoid bumping into the old ladies or wheelchair worms, as both will result in a game over. But things do get tricky once you actually collect the chocolate. Fish Guy will spawn and chase you. He's not faster than your walking speed, but he's always chasing you. This is why it's a good idea to make sure all the doors on the map are open before you actually grab the chocolate, as getting stuck on a door is pretty much game over. Avoiding all the enemies and going back to where you first entered, you can escape and give Mr. Krabs the chocolate. The end. So out of all the games I've played so far, it's probably the shortest, but it was also the hardest, which is why I definitely want to see this expanded on. Like I said before, more levels, increased difficulty, you can't go wrong. Honestly, out of all the games I've played so far, this one was the least scary, but it probably has the most potential. It's a well-lit environment, only one enemy chases you, and the rest all mumble the word chocolate over and over. It's short and chocolate sweet, but it just doesn't satisfy my need for a good SpongeBob terror experience. Well then, how about one with terror in the name? This game, SpongeBob's Day of Terror, was actually made by the developer of the last game, Hawk Sandwich. This guy actually has a few SpongeBob horror games under his belt. I imagine if anyone knows what they're doing, it's this guy. Hey, maybe that last one was just testing the waters. Surely SpongeBob's Day of Terror is an improvement? No. No, it is not. If anything, it's worse. In this one, you once again play as SpongeBob, who needs to collect $9 to buy a bus ticket and leave Rock Bottom. So, where's the challenge? How about how SpongeBob moves at the collective pace of a boulder being pushed by a gust of wind? There's this weird motion blur that I don't like, and absolutely no options menu to change anything up. So, that's great. And how do you collect $9? By collecting these random ass objects that are assigned worth. And who's going to stop you from doing this? Some sausage looking guy who you can only see whenever he shits his pants. This guy might provide some challenge, but he doesn't. He's somehow even slower than SpongeBob, so dodging him is super easy. Once you buy your $9 ticket, the bus picks you up and the game ends. And then starts over. Play it again, I guess. Honestly, it's shocking that this game comes from the same dev as Krusty Seller. Krusty Seller might not be the scariest game I've talked about today, but it has the makings of an enjoyable arcade experience, and at that point had probably the best core idea out of the games I've talked about today. This, on the other hand, has a cool setting and does nothing good with it. But I feel like I'm being kinda cruel at this point, so I'll let it go and say it's still better than Garten of Banban. But then there must be some kind of SpongeBob horror game out there that's actually good, one that both scares you as the player and also reminds you of your beloved childhood series. Well, my friends, I do have some good news for you. It's an older game, and probably the most well-known game I'll be talking about today, Five Nights at the Krusty Krab. There are collectively 3 Five Krabs games: Five Nights at the Krusty Krab, Five Nights at the Chum Bucket, and Five Nights at the Krusty Krab Chapter 3. And of course, these are all FNAF fan games as well as SpongeBob fan games. I figure it only makes the most sense to close out this video talking about it. It's not that good, is it? Well, I'll probably end up talking about these games in a later video anyway. Let me know if you guys want to see that. But hey, there is a more recent release I can look at. This is one that's been making the rounds on YouTube lately, and it's being censored left and right for its gruesome content. Sinister Squidward takes much of the same ideas as something like Red Mist, but approaches it more from the angle of Mr. Krabs overdoses on ketamine and dies. That being said, I wasn't able to get very high quality footage of this game. For whatever reason, OBS just didn't like it. So please enjoy Daco freaking out and censoring a model of Patrick with blood on his shorts. The game begins with Squidward explaining that he's pretty much just had it at that point. He plans to red mist himself, but before he does that, he wants to red mist everyone he hates. So he goes to work and kills everyone, including Mr. Krabs, and a shockingly dark opening to a game like this. I mean, this is basically No Russian all over again. You pick up a gun and kill as many innocents as you can see, and then Mr. Krabs. The actual horror part of this game begins shortly after, with SpongeBob and Patrick having gone missing, and Sandy deciding to find them. You go into SpongeBob's house where Patrick is being brutally tortured in another room. You have to avoid Squidward while gathering tools and materials you'll need to set Patrick free. Once you do so, escort him safely out of the house and go to the living room. Using a secret passage, go to the second floor where you can find SpongeBob strung up to another torture device that's going to pull him in half. Once Squidward activates it, you need to find two things: a bucket of water and a wrench. Using these items on either side of the machine causes it to break, SpongeBob is set free, and Squidward comes in, saying that this is the last time SpongeBob will ever foil his plans. He then stabs himself in the stomach and dies. The end. Overall, not a bad game. It honestly reminds me a lot of Hello Neighbor's earlier builds, skulking around while a single enemy tries to sneak up on you. And although his AI is about as smart as later builds of Hello Neighbor, it's still kinda enjoyable. There's a lot of dark humor in this game that I've kinda glossed over in favor of telling the most complicated story I'll tell today, but there's honestly some really funny moments in this game. In particular, when Mr. Krab seems only mildly displeased Squidward's come to kill him, but starts crying when Squidward says he'll take his money when he's dead. There's a lot of funny stuff in here, and the game overall is fun. But is it scary? Again, no. In my opinion, the scariest game I've played today is Red Mist, and that's probably because it's the only game here I played that had any jump scares in it. Maybe horror and SpongeBob just aren't compatible. But hey, I would hate for developers to stop trying. Just because this handful I picked out today wasn't Hereditary levels of frightening, doesn't mean I want people to stop making games. Please, developers, hear me out. Keep making these SpongeBob games. Make them as scary or ridiculous as possible, and please, please never stop trying. If I discouraged you at all today, that was not my purpose. My purpose was to show that we're simply missing some element. All these games, with the exception of SpongeBob's Day of Terror, are on the cusp of being true horror experiences. I grew up watching this series, and now as an adult, I'm playing what its fans have made. And I don't really want to stop doing that. I'm DMuted. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to subscribe and share this video around. Peace.